Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Moses Kotane Institute virtual lecture on Friday. My name is Bongiwe Julai. I'm the Manager Innovation at the Moses Kotane Institute. Today, we are looking at the progress in modernizing data collection systems to support development, more specifically, how FacetoFace is measuring up to the challenge. The lecture today is brought to us by Ms. Helen North, a firm believer in the old saying that you cannot manage what you cannot measure. Ms. North is currently a Chief Director at FacetoFace, where she heads the KZN Provincial Operations for National Department. She's born, raised in KZN, and has completed her undergrad and postgrad studies at UKZN with honors in geography. And having always been interested in all things spatial and statistical, she has 2 master's degrees, one from University of London and the other from University of Stellenbosch. She has been serving the public sector since 2000, when she started working at FacetoFace in preparation for the 2011 census. The last 2 decades has seen her dedicate herself to this dynamic and demanding statistical agency environment, working on a number of major projects. This has included 2 population censuses, leading the digital data collection project undertaken by FacetoFace, as well as pioneering the statistical frame in preparation for a large-scale community survey. She has also spearheaded efforts to build statistical literacy and capacity, to give meaning to numbers, and to support the development in the province with the Izibalo program and other outreach projects to support the teaching of mathematics. And Moses Kotane is very excited that today to bring you Ms. Helen North. Over to you.
Thank you so much, Bongiwe. As you heard there, my name is Helen North, and I am the Chief Director here at Statistics Africa KZN Province. And I'm really delighted to be invited today to share some insights into how the country's official statistics agency is modernizing our data collection systems to support sustainable development in the country. African Statistics Day was actually celebrated on the 18th of November, and they have this day every year as a way of just increasing public awareness about the role of statistics. And we are very graciously being provided this platform by Moses Kotane today to enhance some of the dialogue around statistics and support of evidence-based decisions. StatsSA is the country's national statistics agency, and we're responsible for conducting a wide range of household and economic surveys. And of course, many people know us for our 10-yearly population census that we conduct, and it's coming up next year in 2021. But today I'm going to share with you some of the progress we've been making in modernizing our collection efforts in pursuit of sustainable development. It was in 2015, in September, that a set of goals toward ending poverty, protecting the planet, ensuring prosperity for all were adopted by countries as part of the new Sustainable Development Agenda. So known as the Sustainable Development Goals, they have replaced what used to be called the Millennium Development Goals. And it was a very broad set of goals, 17 goals for the world's future, and looking toward the year 2030, and consisting of 230 indicators, 169 targets, as a framework for maintaining the coordination of monitoring sustainable development, with the ultimate goal of ending poverty. The main aim of the SDGs is, like I said, eradicating extreme poverty. But what is different, the SDGs are different from the MDGs, is it looks very much at integrating the 3 dimensions of sustainable development. So your economic, your environmental, and your social agendas are all put together in a comprehensive global vision. And this is embedded in a framework of human rights and partnerships. So we are extremely lucky that we have this remarkable, aspirational and measurable agenda. It is global in nature, it is universally applicable, and it provides a shared narrative of development to raise awareness, to mobilize communities and governments with a common purpose. And it also carries with it a lovely vision of leave no one behind. Absolutely key to this measurement agenda is information, and this is where the big challenge comes in. How do we ensure that we have timely, disaggregated and reliable information to serve this development agenda. I really love this quote. It is from a publication called The Data Revolution, Finding the Missing Millions. And it says data are not just about measuring changes, they also facilitate and catalyze that change. Of course, good quality numbers are not going to change people's lives automatically. But even the most willing governments can't efficiently deliver services if they don't know who the people are, where they live and what they need, nor do they know where their resources will have the greatest impact. And this is where data and transformation have such a critical role. So I quite like this diagram. It has always captivated me, the idea that you can have a transformational role of data in the development of knowledge and societal progress and action. And as I said previously, we've got to get the right data to the right people at the right time to make sure that our development agenda is informed and transformed by data. So we want to have this collective goal of progress, but we also want to make sure that it is based on acceptable and reliable statistical evidence, which no one can argue. If you look at why data matters so much, there's a couple of reasons. We use it to report on targets. We draw standardized information for a view of our progress. We use it to monitor that progress and see, are we on track, what's working, what's not working, what needs changing. We also use it, importantly, to create a narrative, the complexity and interconnectedness of our responses, how we inform our policies for smart and transparent decision-making and implementation. And ultimately, we use it for accountability, participation, and empowerment. So you'll hear me saying this over and over again, but the quality, the reliability, availability, and timeliness of that data is critical. Now, in South Africa, Stats SA is responsible for coordinating the Sustainable Development Goals reporting process. It is actually a remarkably complex process because it is not done by us in isolation. We set up several sectoral working groups with people from government, civil society, NGOs, and from those groups we have produced a baseline report in 2017, and we also did our first country report in 2019. We are to produce a report every 2 years, so the final report will be done in 2031. Now, it is easy to say, yes, data is the lifeblood of the SDG process, but we have discovered that there are critical gaps in information. Like I said, there's 230 indicators that we are having to report on, and we actually only have data for 63% of those indicators. And it's a little difficult to see from this diagram, but you can see how we have almost no indicators on some of our environmental dimensions, for example. On our social ones, we sort of have a little bit more, but they are significant gaps. And this is even more bleak when you think that this is a national level report. If we were to take some of those indicators and look at them at a provincial level, we would have even less indicators to report on. So the challenge is quite significant to make sure that we can cover the breadth of information which is needed to be able to inform the sustainable development agenda. Now, when I look at where we are at Stats SA, our traditional statistical platforms are really battling. They are buckling under a lot of pressure to meet the demands for data in the context of sustainable development. These are just some of our sort of burning issues that we face. Shrinking funding, we can't afford our current business model. We have a very costly collection infrastructure to maintain. We do all of our household surveys face-to-face, which costs a lot. Our processes, our methods have served us very well, but they can also be inflexible and rigid in the face of new and emerging data demands. We're also left with a bit of a legacy of some aging technology, and we have to invest in replacing and upgrading. In terms of our external environment, we also have a rapidly evolving user respondent environment with a massive demand for data emerging, not just to inform the Sustainable Development Goal agenda, but for almost everything. And our difficulty is, how do we respond to all of these emerging information needs? Costs are increasing. We're struggling to retain skills. Statistical skills are in high demand at the moment. And we at the moment are unable to fill posts. So we have a lot of challenges in terms of how we remain relevant and responsive. As if that wasn't bad enough, this COVID-19 crisis has really revealed and amplified serious fault lines in our systems and has caused a massive crisis for us. Our field operations have been completely disrupted. All of our current face-to-face data collections have effectively been suspended. And at the same time, a whole variety of new data demands emerged. Politicians were confronted with extremely complex policy decisions that needed good quality, trusted data to guide their decisions, monitor their impact. And the enormous importance of statistics in the face of this pandemic has seldom been clearer. This quote highlights the need for statistics to play an active role in making the world of tomorrow is even more relevant now than it was before. But I'm happy to say that there is good news. The current environment also offers unique opportunities to re-engineer, to innovate and advance. There's new methods, there's new data sources, and there's new processes, all being facilitated by a number of technological advances and the emergence of standards to help us harmonize this data. It is roughly known as the data revolution, an opportunity to help close some of these gaps in access, capacity, and use of data, in response to this increasing demand of the development agenda that I've outlined. So the main part of my presentation today is looking at how StatusA is starting to be agile in the face of these demands and what has our response been. The data revolution gives a number of key points of action which can be defined by various national statistics agencies and will essentially determine whether we're going to have a data deluge or a data drought. The first one of those is to expand our traditional data sources of our household surveys and our administrative records. So lots of capacity building to make sure that we can also get other government departments and the like to be able to contribute toward indicators and data. We also have to take advantage of new methodologies and new data sources, looking at alternative sources of data to fill some of those gaps, but making sure that we harmonize these by applying standards and principles. Critical is also integrating geospatial information. This gives us a spatial and temporal aspect and a where component, which is extremely important, especially when we want to disaggregate data and really get to the final resolution of where things are happening. We have modernization of our data collection systems. And finally, we also have building capacity, literacy, and the ability to communicate, visualize, and use data. This relates very much to building strong user-based systems so that we have people that can make better use of the data, understand the data, and apply it. But for the purposes of today, I'm going to focus just on one aspect of our data revolution, and it's looking at how we are modernizing our data collection systems. StatusA embarked on a very ambitious program to modernize its data collection in response to those internal and external demands which I outlined. And the first bold step that we made away from traditional paper-based questionnaires was to use digital handheld devices. And this was in 2015, and I'm very proud to say that KwaZulu-Natal was the province that was chosen to pilot this digital data collection survey with the Citizen Satisfaction Survey. It was funded by KwaZulu-Natal government, and it was an opportunity to give citizens a chance to express their opinions in relation to service delivery and assess performance of government. And this survey was fortunately very successful, and it paved the way for the digital transition of all our subsequent household surveys to this platform. StatSA has then embarked on a process to re-engineer and transition all our household surveys to what we call computer-assisted personal interviews, and this has been in progress since 2016. So I'll give you just a little bit of an idea of how we do our face-to-face data collection. Face-to-face data collection, when a enumerator will go to somebody's house, is recognized by most of us as the gold standard in terms of how the best way to collect data, basically. And traditionally, all our household-based surveys are conducted this way. We have a team of survey officers who will visit respondents in their dwellings, and they will record all of that information onto paper questionnaires. Using paper, of course, is meaning that we are going to have to scan, capture, process all of these final data sets and eventually get to the point of analysis and publication. I give away my age when I say this, but when I joined StatSA, we had these beautiful hand-drawn maps that we used to have for our sampled areas to help enumerators find their correct sampled dwellings. And we've moved a long way since then, using a lot of GIS technology and spatially enabling a lot of our work. But we were still relying on paper maps, sample listings, and paper questionnaires. So the advantage of this approach has very much been that we've got a lot of face-to-face interaction between our survey officers and respondents, and this allows for clarity seeking and probing to make sure we get the right answers. But of course, the disadvantage is it's very costly. We have to travel to people's houses, we've got to print, we've got to courier, we've got to send questionnaires back and forth. And survey officers could also very easily falsify information. And logistically, it is a very intense way of collecting data. So the computer-aided personal interviews really is just about removing the pen and paper dimension to collection and replacing it with a device. And it makes a massive amount of sense because we remove a lot of the logistics and the data capture. And this introduces massive cost and time savings. We don't have to worry about printing. A lot of the editing and transport of paper questionnaires, for example, is completely eliminated. The introduction of computer-assisted personal interviews has had a significant impact on our turnaround. So, for example, when we did the citizen satisfaction survey, from data collection to dissemination took us 6 months. And that's a process that sometimes would have taken up to 18 months for us to complete. So there is a huge amount of flexibility and agility that comes in terms of having everything loaded on a device. The technology comes with many advantages. Data is synchronized immediately from the device. So we have very short timelines for data processing. Our quality is significantly improved because we can build in controls. We can analyze responses in real time. We can do everything from checking the location of our survey officers to the duration it takes for them to complete their questionnaires. And the use of geographic navigation capabilities ensures that our field workers enumerate selected houses with certainty, and this can be, of course, verified. The system also applies for significant field management, so we can update things easily, change questionnaires or assignments if we need. And the most useful thing about the CAPI processes, we also have what is called paradata. It's a whole lot of data, operational information that we can use to improve our processes. The disadvantages, unfortunately, lie in the cost and the management of the devices. This is an area I think we significantly underestimated. You have to have all of your hardware, software, your server maintenance, all your technical support, as well as the significant amount of ICT and application development skills to support this endeavor. All of this is also facilitated by our Geospatial Foundations, and the geographic frame has really made a significant impact in how we spatially enable all of our survey operations. And this is really the foundation of how we are working and have integrated our modernization. Moving on to the last section of our modernization, We indicated that our face-to-face collection had to be suspended for the foreseeable future due to the COVID outbreak. So we have embarked on a very rapid adoption of 2 new forms of modes, computer-assisted telephonic interviewing and computer-assisted web interviewing. It's just a complicated way to say we can now complete the surveys via telephone or via the web. The telephone will remain your interviewer assisted, and your web is of course self-assisted. And in a way, sometimes you need to thank pandemics like COVID because they have introduced rapid change. So we've had to sort of really fast forward our mixed mode implementation. And this has really had a massive impact in terms of how we are going forward to our next major survey undertaking. Well, it's not a survey, but it's our census undertaking. So we are heading towards Census 2021, as I indicated. It is going to be our first digital census. It is very exciting to be able to say that we are going to be able to offer our respondents different ways of being able to register to either use online or telephonic data platforms. For those who don't opt to do that, we will allow our respondents to complete the census questionnaire using one of our field workers. So there will be more information that we can share with you on our website, and also just to advise that we have started recruitment for our census processes. We have a pilot which is starting next year, and anybody who is eligible to register should please register with our database. We are doing a process of location-based recruitment where we are trying to link our potential enumerators to the areas where they will be working to reduce our costs. So it is very critical that we get as many people as we can into this database. That was a bit of an aside, lobbying people to please share the message that we are looking for recruits. So I'm almost at the end of my presentation, and I'm just summarizing up some of my concluding points. You know, it sounded quite simple at first. We were just going to replace the paper questionnaire with a device in our modernization. But in reality, this process impacted everything in our statistical value chain. All of our solutions require evolution. It's never as simple as one thinks. Business processing mapping was critical, as were our quality assurance system. We faced a very interesting challenge of implementing simultaneously to designing. It was advantageous because it's very responsive, but the disadvantages are poor conceptualization, which can cause hiccups in later stages. And lastly, underestimating the impact of change in terms of our systems, processes, and especially people. With many of our paper-based functions removed, staff were left with some redundant functions. Fear and resistance to change are very hard to imagine or hard to manage in an environment of such flux and uncertainty. So I will leave you with a few contact details. My email is there, as well as our website where everything is on there. I had hoped to also just share some small snapshots of our what we can share with you from the latest SDG report, but I think we are a little bit short on time. But I encourage you to please go and have a look at our SDG online portal. It's a really lovely way that you can have a look at our progress against those sustainable development goals that I outlined at the beginning today. So thank you very much, and that concludes my presentation.
Thank you very much, Ms. North. I think we have a question coming through the line. Is Paradata an important consideration in survey research, and what is its purpose?
Okay, so Paradata is data that gets generated almost transactionally. So when we give our enumerators their devices, it will register things like their location. When they start an interview, it will register when they started the interview. When they started an interview, it will register when they start, and it'll register when they end. And we use all of this sort of transactional data as a way of measuring how things are going. So we could take every single survey officer and look at the average time of completion. We could see also, are they definitely going to the correct households by matching where the sample point was by where they were when they were completing the interview. There is a range of sort of quality measures that we can also put into place. So it's almost like a field of its own. But yeah, Paradata, literally just looking at your operational aspects.
Okay, thank you very much. Another one comes from Anonymous. How effective is the CAWI in collecting quality and reliable data?
That is a good question. I skipped a little bit when I was talking about the advantages and the disadvantages of the different survey methods. And we have what is called it's called mode effect. So depending on which mode you choose, you're going to have different advantages and disadvantages. So one of the advantages of the CAWI, which is the web-based completion of the questionnaire, is that the respondent is doing it themselves. So we have a lot of challenges in, we call them our hard to count communities, our gated suburbs, our high-rise buildings, where our enumerators can't even get into those buildings to administer a questionnaire. And we're hoping that a lot of those respondents will choose this option of doing the web-based questionnaire so that they don't feel threatened or concerned about having somebody in their house or in their yard. But the challenge with such a format is that the person who is completing the questionnaire is obviously not trained, doesn't necessarily understand some of our concepts and definitions. So there has to be a lot of prompting. And the other challenge is that if you make the questionnaire too long, people will get irritated, or if the flow isn't done really carefully, people will just want to abandon and not complete. So we battle at StatsSA because we know the best form of enumeration is definitely when we see people face to face, because we can build a rapport with a respondent, we can explain things, we can see when the questions are not being fully understood, we can unpack some of it. And when it's web-based, we're relying totally on the respondent to be able to give proper answers. So there are definite advantages and disadvantages to your different modes. What we're currently doing at StatsSA now is just having a look at what the effects of those modes are and how we can come up with ways to mitigate them. So, having little maybe things explaining some of our definitions, that if you click on something, you can see, okay, this is what this means, and making it as user-friendly as possible.
Thank you very much. But I think if you stay on that slide, looking at the computer-aided person interviews and your telephonic interviews, what will happen to the rural sides of KZN? Can we see a dual model still persisting, given the difficulty in those areas?
That's exactly why we've adopted the multi-mode, is because we know that we have got such varied settlement types in the province and the country that there's no way we can say one mode is ever going to work in every single settlement type. For me, I'm still curious to see, because we did do some tests a couple of months ago in terms of seeing what would the uptake be in our more rural and traditional societies, because we make an assumption, but it's important that we test some of these assumptions and see. But definitely we normally have a very high response rate when we do our face-to-face interviews in traditional areas. We don't normally have the same challenges that we have in some of our more affluent, high-walled areas where people are very resistant to having people coming into their communities. So we will definitely have, Census will see a very variable approach where we will be able to say, this particular household has opted for telephonic, this one has opted for web, and these remaining households have opted for face-to-face. So we're trying to be as flexible as possible. It's obviously a huge cost saving for us if somebody is going to opt for telephonic or web, because it means we don't physically have to go to their households. So we will definitely be trying to push for that, but we've discovered very clearly there is just no way we can do without the face-to-face collection. It's something that we have to keep, and our statisticians, like I said, they like good quality data, and that's definitely where we get the best quality data from.
Thank you very much. Anonymous again, does Stats SA recruit new field workers for every survey, or there's a designated team of all field workers? So do you recruit per survey, or is there a team where people can, on a rotational basis, be employed?
It's a good question. So we have a set of permanent field workers. We call them our survey officers, as well as a supervisor layer that helps to make sure all of our continuous household surveys are collected, and those surveys include our unemployment. We also have a set of price collectors who go get our CPI and our inflation. So they happen almost continuously throughout the year. But then every now and again we will get one-off projects. Like I said, we did the citizen satisfaction survey, so we had a survey that was user paid. And for those surveys, we definitely make use of contract staff. So we have a database, as I indicated, that's just open now. Anybody who would like to register with that database, we can then source when it comes round to those projects. We sadly were meant to conduct our income and expenditure survey, which is a very important survey for collecting poverty data. But due to the COVID funding crisis that government has found itself in, we had to relinquish our funds for that survey. So unfortunately, that one won't be happening. But that's an example of one where we would have made use of contract staff just for the period of the survey.
Okay. Thank you very much. I think we have one last question, as we think we are 1 minute over. Data is indeed a livelihood for the DSGs, as correctly stated. What do you think could be the way to get around the situation where census is released separately to a com survey, for example, but people want to make decisions based on what platforms such as Youth Explorer are telling them?
It's a very good question, because most of the work that we do at Stats SA, we call it, it's almost like an outcome. It's a snapshot in time. So for example, our census will only reference 9th of October as census night. So when we look back at 2011, we're only looking back at what South Africa was like on the 9th of October. And of course, there's a lot that's changed. So the hope, very much, there was the slide that I presented in terms of the different options for our statistical system, is looking at what are some of our new methodologies and data sources, as well as strengthening some of our traditional. So we have, for example, a lot of administrative data which is lying all over the place. We have, for example, the population register from Department of Home Affairs. We have the district health information systems. There's a lot of very rich data that is available. And really it's about how we start to harness that data so that in between these censuses and in between our surveys, we have a much more sustainable source of data. What's critical with this, though, and this is where the challenge comes in, is the data is not collected for statistical purposes, and we have to then come in and try and work out how do we get standards, how do we get the quality criteria in there so that we can say with confidence, yes, this data is digestible, it is of quality. So that is where the challenge comes in.
Thank you very much. I think we are in the era where data is the new currency, and of course having accurate data that can be accessed in a matter of minutes for decision making, evidence-based decision making, as she indicated earlier, will go a long way in our developmental agenda as South Africa. And I think we'd like to thank Ms. North for a very informative presentation. You will get it on the MKI website, and we will post this presentation on our YouTube channel. So we'd like to thank everybody for having tuned in. Again, see us next week at the same time. Look out for the new adverts. And again, we pledge everyone to go and check the Statistics SA website and join in as we try to make the life of our statisticians a bit easier by logging online and submitting our own Census Online next year. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.